And good afternoon and welcome to the session on small to medium business case study, protecting small business and delivering compliance. The order in which we have labeled this session matters. We start with the notion of protecting small business and delivering compliance. I think throughout the day, those that have attended the keynotes have again been drawn to a key theme of this particular summit, which is that the most important goal of the compliance initiatives, the regulatory initiatives, is first and foremost about protecting small businesses and DoD contractors and higher education institutions, protecting their data and using compliance as a mechanism to enforce those securities. Very too often, we have been seeing numerous debates going on where the entire focus has been all about the commas and the dots and the T's of compliance. And so what this case study is all about is actually sharing with you a real example where we demonstrate to you how a small business facing the exact same challenges on complexity of compliance, cost, went through a compliance process using platforms provided by AWS and Preveil in part, and I'll emphasize in part, to achieve an outstanding result in a DIBCAC audit, achieving 109 out of 110 objectives on a NIST 800-171 framework. So joining me in the presentations over here is Steffan from AWS, Amazon Web Services. Steffan is a senior security partner strategist at AWS with a focus on DoD, Department of Defense compliance. His responsibilities include developing FedRAMP certification and accreditation package for cloud service providers. And I guess as testimonial to his expertise, he's the gentleman that led Amazon Web Services when they received a FedRAMP ATO for impact level 4 and 5, which is the highest levels of impact from the Department of Defense. And I think that says it all. Ted is also a member of the Air National Guard with 26 years of service. He'll start off the presentation with providing an understanding of AWS's capabilities. I'll build upon that with how Preveil helps an SMB. And then to put it all together, we have Jose Neto, or I should say Dr. Jose Neto. He's a founder and lead cybersecurity consultant at PC Warriors. He's a highly accomplished information security manager with over 20 years of diversified experience in information assurance and compliance. As I mentioned earlier, he's a leading cybersecurity expert in CMMC, NIST 800-171, CMMC professional assessor, and a provisional instructor for the CMMC accreditation board. He recently, just this summer, led one of his corporate clients to one of the highest DIBCAC ratings, achieving again 109 out of 110 in NIST 800-171 assessment. So welcome, Ted, and welcome, Jose. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Ted to share with us a little bit about how AWS is playing a role in simplifying compliance by providing a cloud platform that, in essence, subsumes some of the compliance responsibilities and makes them available to SMBs.
Awesome. Thanks, Sanjeev. Let me get my screen going here, and you should be able to see that now. So yeah, as Sanjeev mentioned, I'm Ted Steffan. I am a senior security partner strategist at AWS. I did assist in the FedRAMP High ATO for GovCloud, as well as leading the efforts for IL4 and 5. Today, I'm part of a group that we call ATO on AWS, where we help our partners and customers navigate various compliance programs, not only in the U.S. federal government and DoD, but also public sector, private sector, and international. So today, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how compliance works within our GovCloud region, and how we can support a CMMC workload running on GovCloud. So just kind of reset a little bit as far as what is AWS GovCloud. When we built GovCloud initially, it was designed to handle ITAR workloads. That was the initial compliance framework that we were targeting. And so from there, we initially operated the region using strictly US persons. But as our compliance programs have evolved and matured, we've taken that to higher levels such as FedRAMP High and up to DoD Impact Level 5. And with the implementation of Impact Level 5, we now operate the region strictly from a US citizen basis from a AWS perspective. It is a separate isolated credential database. In other words, the accounts that you have in our commercial regions, while those will work globally with all of the commercial regions, will not work into GovCloud. You'll need to request a different account to get access there. And it is a physically isolated pair of regions. There's one in Oregon and there's one in Ohio. And those regions do share the same identity domain, so you can work back and forth. And in normal AWS design of our regions, each region consists of 3 availability zones. So you have that ability to develop a fully redundant system using the notion of multiple availability zones per region or multiple regions. As I mentioned earlier, we do have additional isolation. We do require all users to operate within a VPC or a virtual private cloud. And this is where we spent our initial efforts in the encryption realm around FIPS 140-2. Much of the FIPS 140-2 validated hardware and crypto services that started in GovCloud have now merged into our commercial regions, US-based commercial regions, but GovCloud is where we built that, as well as various API endpoints. And another important point to call out is when you're looking at the commercial regions, for example, and then comparing that to GovCloud, since AWS is a customer-driven organization, we're not going to put anything in GovCloud unless we have customer demand for it. It's the way we can keep our operating costs down and provide our customers exactly what they need when they need it. And I just want to call out that while GovCloud is considered to have higher security than our other regions, the primary difference is how we have access set up, with it only being US citizens. All of the other security standards are the same regardless of where the region is. And so I want to talk to you a little bit today about the notion of a compliant framework. And this is something that we released late last year, almost a year ago now, on how you can build out an environment to meet compliance needs and requirements, as well as enhancing your security. And as a notional example here, we have the organization's root account, your central account where all of your code development and accounts and things are being managed there. We've got a management services account, a logging account, transit account, and then various mission or our application or service accounts. And when you're looking at this structure, we've got them listed here as accounts, but I've seen this exact same model deployed using VPCs. So just replace the notion of an account with a virtual private cloud. And so with this compliant framework, there's 4 primary things that we were targeting when we built it. Fully automated. Everything to deploy this can be done via a CloudFormation template. The aggregation of all of the AWS environment logs into a single location for any kind of aggregation or correlation that's required. The notion of doing continuous auditing using various AWS services, and then making sure that it's extensively plug-in able. So, many of the additional things that new services that we release, new products that show up on the market are able to plug into that. So, automation using CloudFormation and the Cloud Development CDK. We aggregate all the logs. We're pulling them all into an S3 bucket. We're using continuous auditing capabilities such as CloudTrail and Config, and then that plug-in architecture. We've all seen the chart that CMMC has pulled together in regards to where the practices and domains are at. So let's dive into that a little bit and talk about how you can inherit those using this compliant framework that we've developed at AWS. And once we created this, we had our third-party assessment organization, Cofounder, come in and do a review of the environment. And of the 130 CMMC level 3 practices, they indicated that 61 of those can be fully inherited from AWS. 52 are shared between AWS and our customers, and 17 are fully the customer responsibility. There is a package that you can download, the CMMC customer package. Within the AWS console, there's a service called Artifact. It's a simple document that you can download. It has the CRM, customer responsibility matrix, as well as a couple of other supporting documents. And then, just a quick note, when we talk about inheriting from AWS, one of the things I want to make sure that everybody's aware of is that you can fully inherit from AWS as long as your system is running entirely within AWS. If there's a component that's running on premises or somewhere else, then you'll have to address those services or controls and practices that would normally be fully inherited. You'd have to address those for those systems. So when we talk about where those inheritance practices come from, think about the typical, maintenance, media protection, physical and environmental. So we're going to ensure that all of the infrastructure within our data centers and our availability zones and regions is maintained appropriately. So we're going to make sure that hardware is taken care of. From a media protection and sanitization responsibility, we're going to ensure that not only is all media entering into our data centers tracked and monitored, but it's going to be properly sanitized to NIST standards when it's being disposed of or taken out of the data centers. And then obviously we're going to protect those data centers with all of the physical and environmental security that's required. The shared controls. So think of these as things that not only what we at AWS have to do in order to maintain the environment and ensure that it's operating, but these are the same things that you have to do to make sure that your portion of the environment is secure and operating. Patch management is a great example. We have to make sure that all of our infrastructure is patched, as well as you have to make sure that any of the systems that you're running on top of our infrastructure also have the appropriate patches. Configuration management. We're going to make sure that all of our environment is maintained under a configuration management plan, and you will need to do that as well. And then awareness and training. We train our employees in regards to security, but you as a customer must also train your employees. And then when we start talking about what are the customer specific practices, think about any kind of system or communication protection or zone security that you need to put in place. Making sure that data is routed to the appropriate zones, making sure that data in transit is protected with the appropriate level of cryptography. that is a customer responsibility, and therefore something that you as our customer or partner are responsible for making sure happens. And that's it for my portion. I'm going to turn it over to Sanjeev, and he's going to walk you through his side.
Well, thank you, Ted. Appreciate the presentation. I want to start by offering that Ted gave you a very good understanding of the basic cloud platform that AWS has provided that provides a lot of security and compliance capabilities. But as a small to medium business, you'll still be saying, well, it looks complex. I've got, to establish accounts and so on and so forth. And this is where, Preveil comes in to build upon what AWS has done such a marvelous job of creating and providing it to you in terms of a simple service that you can easily deploy that meets your cost objectives, but provides you with the security that is necessary to achieve compliance. So as a small to medium business, if you're concerned with both your sensitive data, protecting it from ransomware or controlled unclassified information, it's usually in the form of files and you communicate in the form of emails. And Preveil is both an encrypted document collaboration system, as well as an email system that's built on top of AWS that enables you to achieve compliance for not only CMMC, but also ITAR as well. And again, I want to emphasize just the use of Preveil doesn't do it, but it is one of the key components that takes you a long way in achieving compliance. So the document collaboration part of it is called Preveil Drive. Think of it like a Google Drive or a OneDrive. You can store and share your files and folders on it. It's on your PCs, Macs, and mobile devices. You can share information, restrict permissions, etc. And email messaging is using your existing email address, sending end-to-end encrypted, electronic mail messages that are zero trust from Outlook and Gmail. And again, making it all deployable, typically for a small business in a matter of hours. So just a few words on compliance. I think Ted mentioned the 17 domains and 130 practices. And when you look at it, you've got the controls that Ted said, which are in gold, that you inherit from AWS, and then Preveil builds on top of it. And so when you look at the entire matrix, when you use Preveil, the domains in green are provided to you largely through the use of Preveil. And then the domains that are in light green through a combination of policies and procedures plus Preveil, and then the ones in gold from Amazon Web Services. So when you use the platform, again, out of the 130 odd controls, 85 odd or more are addressed either fully or in conjunction with policies and procedures. So not only do you get that, you check off some of the basics in compliance that I'm sure most of you are familiar with. When you use a cloud service, it needs to be FedRAMP baseline moderate equivalent, which Preveil is. Ted mentioned that you need to use FIPS 140-2 validated encryption for your files and emails. When you use Preveil, it comes automatic with it. All of the data that is in Preveil emails and files is stored fully encrypted end-to-end on AWS GovCloud. You get DFAR 7012 C3G compliance, and we'll share with you how you can not only use it for NIST 800-171, which Jose is going to describe, but also ITAR, because under new ITAR regulation, if you use an end-to-end encrypted service, which is FIPS 140-2 encryption, and the cloud provider cannot decrypt the information, which is exactly what happens. Neither Preveil nor AWS can decrypt it. Then you can use the system for gaining compliance. To further simplify your compliance journey, we also provide a basic system security plan template where we pre-populate it with the compliance language pertaining to the features and capabilities that are addressed by Preveil, either on its own or in conjunction with policies and procedures that you need to implement. And this puts you into a strong jump start to get your compliance program going as opposed to starting from scratch. The final word is on data security, which we mentioned is the primary objective. And what's neat about what the system provides you is zero trust data security for your controlled and classified information. I'm going to try to give you a flavor for that. The NSA is recommending zero trust because they say, look, the traditional perimeter-based defense systems don't quite work. But you'll ask, what is zero trust? I'm a small business, I don't quite understand. So let me explain in simple terms. When you store and share CUI on traditional systems such as O365, which by the way are non-compliant in the commercial version, then the emails go encrypted in transit at rest, delivered to the receiving company servers, but the servers can look at that information and so can the attacker. In a modern zero trust system, since you assume the servers, no matter how well protected they may be, can be attacked, we use end-to-end encryption so that in Preveil, any email and file gets encrypted on the sender's device, stored on the AWS GovCloud, encrypted, and can only be decrypted by the recipient. So as a consequence, even if the attacker attacks and compromises the servers on AWS GovCloud, all they get is encrypted information, which is worthless. It also protects you from ransomware attacks as well. Second, we don't use passwords, and instead of passwords, authentication is provided by an encryption key that's stored on your device. The benefit of that is that an encryption key is uniquely tied to your email address and is unguessable by any modern guessing technique. And second, since the key is tied to your device, only your device can access the data and it cannot be remotely logged into. Third, you've heard about administrative vulnerabilities, where if an admin is compromised, and Charles Carmichael mentioned that this morning as being the biggest vulnerability, then the entire organization can be taken down. So what Preveil does is it distributes trust amongst a group of admins so that a user's authentication credentials, namely their keys, are broken up amongst a group of admins or owners of a company, so that each individual admin has only a part of your key. So if they're compromised, nothing happens, they don't get access to the information, and neither can the attacker. But if the admin needs to, for legitimate purposes, need access to the information, just as this animation is showing, they seek permission from other approvers, your keys are recreated, and you get access. Think of it as a multi-signature in the, if you are crypto, currency owners. So it's a neat and simple way to protect yourself even from admin attacks. And then finally, the system allows you to restrict access to your CUI only to designated individuals and domains so that you can't exfiltrate information outside the trusted community, nor can somebody try to phish and attack you inside the trusted community because the system prevents that. So it's a simple system to deploy and use. One of its key benefits is that you can continue to use your Office 365 commercial or G Suite for non-defense work. When you deploy the system, for those folks that handle CUI, emails, files are automatically encrypted and stored and shared. You don't need to go and rip and replace your existing systems. And the system, which is Preveil, can be deployed to your infrastructure without any changes to your existing IT infrastructure. So it's a simple deployment model, and that's how you have a method by which you can gain state-of-the-art security, get a head start on compliance, and meet your financial objectives. So now to share with you how all this is put together in an actual compliance program that was taken to the DIBCAC for an actual audit, I'm going to stop sharing and hand over to Jose.
All right, thank you, Sanjeev, and thank you for coordinating this. To all the participants that are connected, I hope you get some real value out of this presentation. We always think about the do's, but sometimes we don't think about the don'ts. And the challenges and shortcomings are very important to understanding how we can successfully deploy a robust infrastructure and a compliant infrastructure as well. So I'm going to be sharing my screen in a second, and we can begin with this presentation. All right, so the emphasis here is to build an excellent and compliant cybersecurity posture. And we're going to talk about that and the importance of the sequence of how we deploy and how we surpass the different challenges as we navigate this compliance journey. So the agenda for today is we're going to talk about expectation versus reality. We'll look into some of the common mistakes that we've observed in dozens of different defense contractors, small and medium. We'll discuss the deployment challenges, and within this topic, we're going to talk about building on top of an existing IT infrastructure, looking into secure tailored design rather than just going with a cookie cutter approach and with templates, and researching the effective sequence on how we can deploy all these different security countermeasures effectively. Last, we'll discuss about our DIBCAC audit score, which was we were able to secure a 109 out of 110 for our preferred clients, and how we can leverage this proven methodology for other small and medium-sized defense contractors as well. So first, I want to give you, everyone who's connected, I want to present a visual. Let's assume that you've been tasked, your company has been tasked to design, develop, and build a secure and compliant military transport vehicle. So in your mind, you start thinking about, well, we need bulletproof glass, we need titanium steel, we need encrypted telecommunications. We build this idea of what the perfect product would be, and you're thinking it might look something like this, perhaps, something very robust. And that would be the expectation. But the reality is, sometimes we're not as fortunate to begin from scratch. We have to start basically on an existing infrastructure. So the expectation versus reality might look something different than what we have in mind. You know, we planned for this, but in reality, we end up with something that was not the anticipated result. And the reason for that is because of our existing infrastructure. We have to understand what our infrastructure is so we can understand the capabilities and the deficiencies. And then we can build a strong foundation as we navigate the compliance journey. So some of the common mistakes and challenges that we have observed, and what we do as a cybersecurity consulting company is we create a knowledge base. And when we find best practices and when we find deficiencies and shortcomings, we create this knowledge base so that we can share that and leverage that with our future clients. So what we see is something very common is the incorrect interpretation of security requirements. And the reason for that is we know that the language, the compliant language, can be a bit abstract and it can be subjective. And even during the assessment, the assessors may interpret security policies and requirements different than the way the organization is interpreting them. So this is a very common challenge that we face. The next one is, as Sanjeev mentioned it, it's about creating a holistic approach. What we see is that most of these organizations, they start thinking about a particular security countermeasure or maybe a domain, a control family, but they don't see things as a collective. And when you think about establishing a secure and robust cybersecurity posture, you need to think holistically, not just as individual security controls. The next thing that we see is the involvement, key stakeholder involvement. You want to make sure that there's high visibility for your senior managers, for your staff members, for your program managers, even your staff, the end consumer. You want to be able to introduce the countermeasures and get their feedback ahead of time, so that way they can have so they can buy into the countermeasures that you are deploying for your organization. Last, I think this is one of the most critical things that we've also encountered is that organizations begin the process and they go through procurement, they buy the security solutions, but they don't necessarily test until everything is deployed. And when they begin testing, there's a lot of conflicts that are in place. And then you have to take a step back and you have to analyze what's working and what's not working, if there are any conflicts, technical conflicts between the solutions. So what we recommend is periodic testing from the process, from the beginning phase all the way throughout the end. And last, another aspect that I see that is a challenge in my personal perspective is I interface sometimes with senior managers, maybe different staff members, that they are actually reluctant to change. They've been conditioned to this atmosphere of convenience that adding another layer of security, which affects their convenience, tends to be some conflict. And we have to change the corporate culture and the idea that security is affects your convenience. We really have to think of security as a way of protecting the asset. So it takes a lot of training and a shift in the corporate culture to get everybody to embrace security as an important key aspect for day-to-day operations. So the first thing we talked about was building on top of an existing infrastructure. I think, in my opinion, this is the most critical step. And I think it goes beyond just compliance. And I'm going to address that. It's very popular. Most of the companies that are looking to be compliant have heard of the gap analysis or the readiness assessment. And while that is a very key component to understand your deficiencies from a compliance standpoint, it really doesn't address the specifics as far as your technical deficiencies. And I think you actually need both. You can't just create a very effective roadmap by understanding the metrics of what's deficient. You actually need to understand that what are the deficiencies and inabilities for your current infrastructure, and merge that with your compliance knowledge from your gap assessment. And now you have a clear path. Now you know what technologies you need to enhance, correct, remediate, and you know the certain compliance security controls that need to be addressed at the same time. So I think one of the biggest takeaways would be, don't just focus on the compliance aspect, but also focus on the technical infrastructure and basically combine both compliance and technical knowledge as you build a detailed roadmap for your deployment. Let's talk about a tailored security design approach. So what I see is different entities, they look at best solutions, let's say from their prime, their subs, their sister companies, and they just, if someone else is using it, then they want to get the same solution and use it in their organization. And sometimes it may work, but what works for one company may not necessarily work for another. And this has to do with the size of the company, the scope of the mission, and so many factors that need to be taken into consideration. So what we recommend is that you do some very detailed research and pick out and select the solutions that will apply and be highly effective in your environment. So standalone solution products work effectively, but they provide limited protection. And when you look at things as a collective, then you start seeing if this one solution may conflict with the other solution. So what we recommend is to do very comprehensive research for every single countermeasure that's being implemented. I think the biggest challenge in our industry as far as cybersecurity is being able to strike the balance between security and convenience. And I know that the end users, the staff, feels the same way. You know, they want to be productive, they want to be secure, but it's finding that particular middle point that it's actually, I would say that's probably the most challenging aspect of compliance, security, deployment, and making sure that we can still conduct day-to-day operations. And I would say the factors would be the scope of the CUI mission. If there's 100 users in your organization and only 10 of them are doing CUI, then we know what the scope of that mission is. The size of the company, is it just one location, multi-location? What is the minimum operating baseline? What are some of the day-to-day operations that are needed in order to conduct the mission? And ultimately, what is the desired level of protection? And if you're actually willing to accept a percentage of risk. So all these variables need to be clearly defined. So I would say once we start the deployment process, let's say that you've already researched the security solutions that you need, then it's you're at the point where you need to start deploying things. And this can't be random. You can't just pick, we're going to start with access controls, and then we're going to jump to physical security, and then we're going to jump to auditing. If you look at things, once again, the emphasis on being a collective holistically, you need to plan so that everything that has to be a sequence of events, because then this can create delays, or it may create troubleshooting, and you need to assign more human capital to fix the inconsistencies. And I would say if you do have a project manager, this is the time to leverage your project manager so that you have someone that's tracking the deployment and the execution of the countermeasures. I would say that if you incorrect plan this phase, it will create those technical conflicts that we just discussed. And I can give you a perfect example. Let's say endpoint security. I believe it's very critical to how we secure our laptops, our phones, our tablets. just as much as we secure the infrastructure with enterprise tools such as the firewall and intrusion detection systems. So, but the problem would be if you happen to install the endpoint protection too early in the game, it may actually create conflicts as you begin trying to install other security solutions, and it may see them as malware, and now you have to start troubleshooting. So understanding the perfect sequence of how to deploy your entire compliance deployment is very key to this. And the example I can tell you is, imagine building a house. You decide to go to the roof, the walls and everything else, but you forget about the foundation. You leave it for the very end. I think we all can understand that this house would probably collapse if that is the deployment sequence. So I just wanted to illustrate how critical it is to understand the sequence of the rollout and the deployment of the security countermeasures. So now let's transition. Now that we understand the do's and don'ts, let's talk a little bit about the DIBCAC audit that we were able to secure for one of our preferred clients and getting them a 109 out of 110. We're very happy for our client. We're proud of this because it shows that it is possible. So for those of you small companies that you think that this is not feasible, that you can't accomplish this, through the use of multiple solutions and cloud services, you can definitely combine all these technologies and create something robust and compliant at the same time. So what is the compliance conundrum? So we have quality, we have time, and we have cost. And unfortunately, for the most of the time, you can only pick two. And that is where we start. If you want something that's high quality and you want good cost, then you're leveraging, or it's going to be expensive. If you want something fast, it's going to be expensive. Otherwise, it's going to be slow, or it may not be of good quality. So you really have to think, what are your priorities, and think about rolling out your deployment. So with that in mind, let's talk about the constraints. What are we facing as companies? And you may have, next week, the government, the DCMA may call you and say, you've been selected. The technologies that your organization is working, we feel are very high tech and sensitive. So we want to assess your current infrastructure. They may give you 3 months, maybe 4 months, but now you have a time constraint that you need to work towards. Then you have most of the companies that I've seen do lack some formal security policies and procedures and compliance, and trying to build a complete infrastructure full of documentation will take some time, and it takes a lot of processing and understanding how this will impact current operations. I've also looked into the majority of the ISSMs are very tech savvy, and they're very security conscious, but I think there is a gap in terms of the between the link between security and government compliance. So I would say that's a different type of constraint, more along the lines of training and experience. Then we also find some ad hoc approach to procurement and deploying that I mentioned before. Companies just begin acquiring and procuring solutions, and then they start deploying them without having a systematic approach. And this can definitely impact the end result. And last, as I mentioned, is once you do have a really good compliant, strong infrastructure, you do want to emphasize on training the staff, senior managers, your ISSM, your security team, so that they can actually continue to sustain and maintain compliance. And more importantly, maintain a strong cybersecurity posture for your organization. So let's look at some of the success tips that we recommend. So time is, we recommend 6 months to a year based on your current cybersecurity posture. And I would say I'm leaning more towards the 12 months because most companies they don't have the maturity enough to get their organization compliant right away. I would say most companies are more along it's going to take them about 12 months, unless you're actually a technology focused company that has some serious security infrastructure. That would be the companies that would maybe take 6 months to get fully compliant. I would say establish a team both with technical and government compliance SME, subject matter experts, to work in tandem. You can't just focus on the technical and leave the compliance side, or vice versa. Don't just focus on the compliance and leaving the technical side aside. You want to make sure that both professionals work together so that we can create effective, efficient, and compliant solutions as we deploy and we navigate our compliance journey. I would say don't rush into the planning phase. because this will expedite the procurement and the deployment process. And this will also minimize those conflicts that we talked about for technical incompatibilities. I know Sanjeev referenced the SSP, the System Security Plan is key. Don't think in terms of a checklist mentality. In 2021, trying to successfully pass an official government assessment with a checklist is not viable anymore. They don't expect to go through a checklist. And what they do expect is to have a comprehensive guide that tells you exactly what the security solution is, how you're implementing it, what are the validation steps, and what is the supporting evidence that you can use to substantiate that this actually works and that this will continue to work. And it's not just going to be a temporary fix. So we need longevity and we need maturity in these cybersecurity solutions that we are utilizing. And last, once again, I want to reiterate training. Now that you have all these different solutions, leverage that and train your personnel so that they can make the best of those capabilities. For example, with Preveil, like Sanjeev mentioned, utilizing the drive capability to safeguard and to save your encrypted files and the email capabilities that it also presents. So understanding everything that's accessible to you and leveraging those capabilities is very advantageous. So to finalize this, it's all about sustainment. For most of the companies, once they attain a level of compliance, they feel that they've reached the end of the journey. And I would actually say that that's actually the beginning of the journey. Getting to a compliant, strong cybersecurity posture is the beginning. Now it's all about getting your staff to embrace the security concept and to maintain and start beginning to build that maturity, right? Because for CMMC, it's not just about having the security solution. It's about demonstrating maturity that this is actually effectively working and safeguarding your infrastructure. So once you attain compliance, like I said, that's where the journey begins in the next phase of building that maturity with ongoing monitoring and getting your infrastructure and doing all the required activities, the meetings, the paperwork, the paper trail that needs to show the compliance that these actions were performed. So there are many requirements that have to be performed throughout the year. So last, what we've encountered is the fact that the do's and the don'ts can be a little daunting, can be a little confusing. And like I said, what type of solutions do we implement? How do we research the solutions? Are there going to be any conflicts? How do I deploy? Which solution do I deploy first and create a systematic methodology? So I think this is the one challenge that we all faced. And so what we've done is we created what we call the Cybersecurity Compliance Express program. And we've taken those do's and don'ts into that. So like I mentioned before, we've created 2 tracks, 6 months and a 12-month track. And depending on where you're at, I think that will help you leverage all those problems, challenges, and ways to streamline and to avoid those pitfalls that we discussed. So for those of you that are interested in learning some more about this methodology that helped us attain the 109 out of 110, feel free to contact us. If you have a phone, go ahead and scan the QR code. I'm always accessible and my team is always accessible to help navigate and guide this process along with all these other vendors and security solutions. I really thank everybody for your time and your participation. I hope you found this presentation valuable and hopefully it's going to help you expedite your compliance journey.
Thank you very much, Jose. I would also add that, Jose co-authored a case study on how he guided his clients to the NIST 800-171 audit. And that case study is available both, I suppose, from the PC Warriors website, but also you can go to preveil.com and get access to that white paper as well. So I will, we're at 3:45 right now. I'll check with Orly, do we have time for a few questions? I suspect about 5 minutes.
Yes, Jose, Sanjeev, yes. Jose, great job. Reflective of the wonderful job you and Ted have done. There's a bunch of questions in Q&A. So Sanjeev, why don't we make the hard choice of choosing 1 or 2, and then we'll go and prepare for the 4 p.m.
Okay, so I'll start with the first question that is on Preveil's FedRAMP moderate status. So I want to clarify that the requirement from the Department of Defense for both C3PAOs and CMMC providers is for FedRAMP ATO or FedRAMP moderate equivalent. And so Preveil is FedRAMP moderate equivalent. We got the equivalency by implementing all of the FedRAMP controls, and then got ourselves independently audited by an accredited FedRAMP 3PAO, and that's how we established equivalence. And then we finally took the step of going to the CIO's office at the Department of Defense and getting their concurrence that meets the DoD's requirements. And we have received concurrence that FedRAMP moderate equivalence can be established by getting an external audit by an accredited 3PAO. And so it's a long-winded answer, but the nuts and bolts of it is yes, Preveil is FedRAMP moderate equivalent, even though you don't see us on the marketplace. The second question is, I suppose, a technical question that I'm going to direct to you, Jose. It's on the requirement for security practice of locking up computers after a set amount of time if there's no activity. What is the definition of activity? Is it a user working at the device, or does a piece of software running a test count as activity and should not lock the device? It's a very specific question, but you may want to provide us an overview of, essentially shutting down computers after a certain period. So over to you, Jose, for any guidance that you can provide.
Sure. This is actually a very interesting question. One may think if you just read it, it's very simple, but it's actually not, and it depends on the organization. So based on your day-to-day operations, yeah, activity may be you walk away from the computer, and that may be deemed as inactivity, right? And we can write the policy in such a way that we say our users are in front of the systems, but if they leave the system unattended for X number of seconds, the system automatically will present a lock screen. But what happens in the case that you're actually dealing with an organization that may be doing overnight testing, and it is actually some CUI information metrics that are being recorded or tracked, or more sensitive information that may not necessarily have a person in front of the machine. So this is one of those instances where I would actually look at the day-to-day operations, and based on the ongoing operations, which may be manned or unmanned, and then we would write policy that would be specific. And like I said, say tailored security design. We can't use a cookie cutter template approach to this. We would have to tailor it specifically for the company and define what inactivity means for that company.
So thank you. And I have one last question, and that I think is to Ted. Ted, there's a question that says, is AWS GovCloud equivalent to GCC High? How would you answer that?
Yes, Sanjeev. So from a compliance perspective, AWS GovCloud has achieved the FedRAMP High ATO through the Joint Authorization Board of the FedRAMP program, as well as the DoD IL4 and 5 ATOs. And that's all publicly available on our internal website, on the public websites. So from a compliance perspective in the FedCiv space, we're FedRAMP High. In the DoD space, we're up to Impact Level 5.
Thank you very much. I would also say that, to add a little bit of color to what Jose had pointed out, we have a great deal of regard for the GCC High, capability as well. And it may well be that for very large organizations that are seeking compliance, it could be a good fit, and is indeed a good fit. So you have choices available to you, but it's less well understood how well AWS GovCloud provides the strong compliance capabilities that are necessary for DoD compliance. and how well it does in particularly meeting the needs for small to medium enterprises as well. So I'd like to thank our distinguished panel. Thanks so much, Ted, for joining us and for sharing with us AWS GovCloud's immense capabilities. Thank you, Jose, for sharing with us an outline of best practices and the program that you developed that led to achievable results for a small to medium business. You can reach Ted. Ted, could you kindly share your email for further follow-ups?
Yeah, absolutely, Sanjeev. It's steffat@amazon.com.
Thank you very much. And I think Jose had provided his email address. So with that, there we go. It's my email is simply reach out at info@preveil.com and we will respond. Or you can, if you want to reach me personally, it's Sanjeev, SANJEEV @preveil.com. Again, thank you so very much for your participation, to the audience as well as to our distinguished speakers.